This is the Purple Passion Project with host and clinical sexologist, Dr. Stacy Friedman. This is your go-to podcast for raw, real, and irresistibly juicy conversations about sex, intimacy, connection, and everything in between. Whether you're feeling a little stuck in your love life, curious about what turns you on, or just craving conversations that actually matter, you're in the right place. So now, please welcome the host of the Purple Passion Project, Stacy Friedman.
Hello. What do you get when you mix purple, passion, and permission to be your true self? This podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Stacy, and this is the Purple Passion Project coming to you live and unfiltered. This is the show where we talk sex, intimacy, connection, and everything underneath the surface. Because let's be honest, small talk is boring and you're ready for the good stuff. So relax, drop your guard, and get ready for truth, laughs, maybe a few gasps, and a whole lot of passion. Today's topic is when sex feels like a chore. We want to find out how to rediscover intimacy while raising kids and having a family. If you have questions as we go along our live show, feel free to call in as your questions may be answered live. I wanted to introduce my guest today. Today, I'm joined by someone who helps couples navigate the beautiful chaos of love, connection, intimacy, my good friend and colleague, Susan Block. Susan is an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she owns Coral Springs Counseling Center. She supports people in building stronger, more connected relationships, even when life gets hectic. She's insightful, down to earth, keeps it real. Susan, welcome to the Purple Passion Project, and thanks for being my first guest.
I am honored to be here today with you, my friend and colleague. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. At the end of the show, we're going to find out how everyone can find you. But for now, I want to get right into some of the good, juicy questions that everyone wants to know about. And we want to find out the main idea of our show is how to reconnect when you have kids, when you have a family, and why does intimacy sometimes feel like a chore or just another item on the to-do list? So when you see couples and they're trying to figure out how to get things back together when they've been in a relationship and they have kids and family, what do you see are some of the biggest intimacy roadblocks that some of the couples have?
Yeah, what a great topic we're doing, because I cannot
Absolutely.
tell you the countless people who are seeking counseling because of this reason. So, one of the biggest roadblocks is that emotional disconnection that can occur in relationships when life starts to get busy. You're, doing the parenting thing, the career, all the responsibilities, and just that relationship goes on the back burner and you have that emotional disconnection. Also, it's that lack of intentional time together. You might be spending a lot of time, taking the kids to soccer practice or school functions, but they really stop prioritizing their one-on-one connection. So it's just that lack of intentional relationship time together. And then with that, lastly, comes the resentment over time that starts to build slowly. And it can be years of resentment that just builds over time. And so when couples don't feel supported from one another over time, they just start to resent one another.
I see that a lot, lots of resentment. And I like the way you said to have things intentional, to do things that are intentional. Sometimes when you're just going out to soccer practices, those are things that you kind of have to do, and you're not focusing on making a point to say, what can we do that is specifically intentional and help building the relationship and help building that intimacy. So I really like how you use that word intentional. So many times in my practice, I have people coming in, and one of the main issues that they say is that sex feels like a job and feels like a chore. And it's not anything fun that they're doing anymore. They're not connecting anymore. And they're just, something to check off the list. And we already have so many things going on. So why do so many couples feel that way after having kids or just being so hectic? Why is it always something that you have to check off the list?
Exactly. It's just, it shouldn't be, but it becomes that over time. And I just think there's so many things that play into that, like the mental overload that couples are dealing with on a regular basis. Like we talked about before, just juggling work, the responsibilities, childcare, household responsibilities. It's a lot. So I think those resentments just start to build up naturally over time. And if they're not aware of the relationship, then those things can kind of erode over time.
Oh, absolutely. And like we were saying, the stress, exhaustion, all these different things do come into play. And we do have to be, once again, intentional on how we make those plans for your situations that people come in and just like, oh, it's something to do. So we need to find ways that you can offer, I can offer, that we can make it fun. And I think that sometimes it's just a change of mindset, because if you look at it as, oh God, it's just something I got to do, then
Yeah.
that's the way you're going to think about it. So we do have to try to find ways to either help our clients or them helping themselves to make it fun and connecting. So when parents have kids and they're trying to say, oh, well, we're going to have kids and things are going to be better. What are some common myths that some couples do believe about what their sex life may be after having kids or a family?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myths is that if we really love each other, then this should just come naturally to us. It used to come naturally when we first met. And so why doesn't it come naturally now? So that's definitely one myth. I think another myth is all the comparisons they hear, maybe their other couples friends who seemingly are in healthy, happy sexual relationships. But really, does anyone know what's going on behind closed doors? So we start comparison, we compare, and you got to be really careful with comparison. The other thing is that if we touch each other and it doesn't lead to sex, then why bother? And I think that that's another myth that people think. And, maybe when they first met, they would rip each other's clothes off and it would always lead to sex. But over time, just knowing that it's okay if your relationship and your sex life changes, you have less time. And so, the time that you do have can be for cuddling, it can be for massages, bubble baths, like whatever it may be. It doesn't always have to lead to intercourse.
Right. And that's a great thing. I want to just touch on a couple of things that you said. And it's funny that when you mention that you might hear some of your couple's friends saying things, and it might be like, oh, well, they always sound like they're having good sex. They're always having, depends on who you ask. If you ask one partner versus the other partner, you may get two totally different answers. One partner might be like, oh, yeah, trying to maybe show that their relationship may be better because maybe they're ashamed that they're not meeting up to the societal standards of what a relationship should be. And they might be like, oh, yeah, we have sex 3 days a week. And someone might be like, oh my God, you do? And they're like, oh, is that okay? Is that normal? Is that not?
Right.
And it's okay to have it once a week. It's okay to, if both, depending on both people, what they need. And yeah, and I think that what you said about making it where it's not always about sex, that's also extremely important, because we do stop touching. And I know that I see a lot of people that once they realize that every time that they touch, it has to turn into something, they almost get like a touch aversion, where
Yeah.
you go to touch them and then they like back off, like, no, nope, I'm not going to do this because it's going to lead to something. And so,
Well, yeah, and I
yeah,
was going to add to that. I see that so often with the couples that I work with, where and you said it perfectly. It's like one partner might not want to touch, they might want to hug, and they might want to cuddle, but they're afraid that might lead into intercourse, so then they back off, they don't do it, and then the other person feels a sense of rejection. So it becomes almost like a vicious cycle within itself.
right, exactly. And so when you do have, let's say, situations where all the other things are stress, exhaustion, all that kind of things are, sabotaging the couple's connection, do you have some recommendations how people can kind of sneak in time or opportunity to connect when they have kids and they have sports and homework and baths? And I have so many people that say, oh gosh, after 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock, the kids are in bed, all I want to do is crash.
Mhm.
So how do you try to help those couples when they have that struggle with that connection?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is communication. It might sound cliche or an overused word, to communicate more effectively. But if couples can stay in touch with each other, not just the business of the day, the
Right.
chauffeuring kids to and from all of their events and school functions, but really communicating, taking 10 minutes. I have the couples that we work with on our team, we call it the marital meeting, where they can just take maybe 10 minutes, whether it's every day or a few times a week, and they can just get in touch with one another, not just about the logistics of their family, of, hey, did you call the plumber or did you pick up this or that from the grocery store? But it's like, hey, how are you feeling? Take a temperature read of the relationship and just gauge where they each are. What's the highlight of the week? What are things that they're really struggling with that week? And the more they can stay in touch with one another, the better their overall intimate feelings toward one another are going to be.
Yeah, that's a great tip because so many times when I find that people go out, they're like, oh, yeah, we go out on date nights. We have a babysitter for the kids. I'm like, well, what do you talk about? Work and kids. So
Yeah.
it's important to have, to not have those conversations about the mundane tasks about life and to do take 10 minutes, 15 minutes once a week, 3 times a week, but just have something just every single week to find a way to connect and make that time, whether it's sitting outside on your patio with a glass of wine or a tea, or just sitting there watching TV and maybe turning it off for a few minutes and just having those conversations and making it about something intentional, going back to that word intentional. And
Exactly.
right, and saying, how do you feel, how are we, how's our connection, how's our sex? That's something that a lot of people do have a little bit of a difficult time
Yeah, but
talking
I
about.
think what happens for couples is that they get out of the habit and the routine of talking about those things. So those conversations can feel a little awkward, or if they have some of those resentments built up, the last thing they're going to be feeling safe to talk about is their sex life or their intimacy. So this is why having the marital meeting on a regular basis and really like talking about some of the hard stuff, to say, what are you struggling with in our marriage right now? What can I do to best support you? And when they have more of those conversations, the safer the sex talk begins to feel.
Absolutely. And so when you do have situations where you see that later on in the evenings and things are getting tired and everyone's ready to go to bed, is that a good time to do it? Or do you feel that you want to do it when you are out of the bedroom, when you are maybe more energized on a weekend? What do you recommend as a good time or place to have those conversations?
Well, I definitely think the last place to, or the last thing you want to do is talk about your sex life when you're in the bedroom, and you see some things coming up. I think just kind of go with it and then maybe schedule out in the morning or at a mutually agreed upon time, kind of neutral setting, neutral
Neutral for sure.
time. Yeah, where everyone's like, the kids are distracted and maybe you're more rested, where you can say, hey, look, that thing happened in the bedroom last night. I really want to sit down and talk it over with you. When's a good time for us to do that? So it's definitely not right before kids go to bed and bath time and you're preparing dinner.
When
But
everyone's pulling their hair out of their
yeah,
heads.
exactly. And it's really not the most, attractive or sexiest time in a family's life, so definitely waiting for the right moment is a good thing.
Well, that sounds great. And I know the next, after our commercial break, we do want to talk about a little bit more about how communication could be more of the foreplay, because getting couples talking again about the good stuff is going to be more important to be able to discuss the intimacy and the sex, and getting away from all of the everyday mundane tasks to reconnect, because I know that you lose a lot of that when you are stuck in taking the kids here, taking the kids there, doing this, doing that. So on the next break, after we come back from our commercial break, we'll be gone for about 2 minutes. So make sure you stick around and we'll talk a little bit more about communication and how we can get that going back again. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a break. And we'll be back in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Hi, thanks again for listening to the Purple Passion Project. We're here with our guest, Susan, who is an LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we are talking about trying to get couples together again after having kids, trying to find the reconnection. And we were talking about, before our last break, about communication and how important it is to be able to have intention with our conversations, to be able to find things to talk about besides our daily routines, because we want to be able to reconnect in our relationship and talk about the good stuff. So let's get going and talk about how communication could really be foreplay for what we're bringing into the bedroom. When couples do feel disconnected and they come and see you, what is some of the first things that you help them with when it comes to communication? I know you spoke about having that, 10-minute marital, what did you call it? A marital block?
Marital meeting.
Marital meeting. So besides something like that, are there other things that you help people with when it comes to communication?
Yeah, and I have to say, I love how you described how communication is really that one of those steps towards intimacy, and I
Mhm.
couldn't agree with you more on that. So I want to give some tools to people listening of ways to really begin to step in to create some parameters, not just for intimate conversations, but all conversations in their relationship. And the very first thing I would say is that you want to have emotional safety
Absolutely.
established where you can feel that you can let your guard down with your partner, that you can step into vulnerability without any fear of criticism or any backlash. So being able to, and that might mean working with a couples therapist to help with some of that communication. But really, that's the first step is that emotional safety.
That
Next, you
safety is, I would say, probably one of the number one things. Absolutely.
yeah, without that, you can't have any of the other things that we're about to
Yeah.
talk about. So the next thing is, and this is something that I teach, my team teaches when we're talking to couples that we work with, is about it's called like reflective listening. That's maybe like an older term, but basically, in a nutshell, is when your partner comes to you to say, I'm really struggling with X, Y, or Z, to be able to state that back to them, to really show that the message that your partner is bringing up to you is actually what you're hearing, because
Right.
sometimes we're kind of coming in with our own agenda, or we might be frustrated, so
Or
we're hearing.
defensive.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you can slow it down and say, okay, let me make sure I'm hearing what you're saying. You're saying that you're feeling overwhelmed, and I'm noticing that you're juggling, all the responsibilities. Is that what you meant? So just asking them, here's what I heard you say. Is this what you meant? And
Am I
just
hearing it right?
exactly. And
Right.
just in doing that, your partner is going to feel more connected to you because they are like, oh, they heard what I said. Okay, that feels really good. So just that little shift, and instead of like jumping down each other's throats, to slow it down, to listen, to take in what they're saying, and then just repeat it or summarize it back to them. The
And
other
making
thing,
sure you're off your phone while listening.
oh, so Dr. Stacy, that is a whole other podcast that maybe one day we'll get into. So another thing that we want to do is help, like, instead of getting into like criticism, like, oh, why does everything always have to turn into an argument, or why does everything have to become sexual? If I go in to hug you, why do you always have to think it's going to lead to intercourse? Instead of those forms of criticism, what we really want to do is just state how we, like, a deeper emotion about it, like, I really enjoy cuddling with you on the couch, or I enjoy, hugging you, or I love when like we touch like through massage, but it's frustrating sometimes when it tends to lead to intimacy all the time. And I would really
You're
love for us,
starting with a positive.
yeah, like I like this thing that we're doing. I just don't want it to always lead into, the other.
Right, right. And that's very important because I know, like we just talked about earlier in the podcast, is that so many times people wind up having this, reflex of keep away
Mhm.
from me because, and it's not, so many times it's not that the person doesn't want to be touched or the person doesn't want to be, kissed or played around with. It's just that they're not ready for the intimacy, and people are taking things sometimes too seriously when, okay, well, you go give a hug. Well, it has to turn into this. Well, that's why so many times the person backs up because they don't want it at that moment, but yet they still want that intimacy and connection. So,
Exactly.
so those are, yeah, those are definitely some great things to work on and to help with that communication. Did you have any other ones, or
Yeah, I
is
would
that?
think those are just kind of the starters for them.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, and also we were talking about, just having conversations about things in general. When we
Mhm.
talk about sex and desire with our partners, I know in my practice, so many people are afraid to talk about sex and
Mhm.
intimacy because it'll turn into a fight, or maybe they're just not used to talking about it with their partner. So it feels awkward to say what I like, what I don't like. And people will just avoid the subject altogether. So, how do we invite those conversations to add to what you just explained? How do we do that without it turning into a fight, without making our partner feel less than or like you're criticizing? I know that you said you put a little positive spin on it. So maybe try to see what kind of examples can we offer if we're going to say, I don't like the way you're doing this, but I want you to do this instead. How do we get into the bedroom and
Yeah.
have those conversations?
Well, I think if we can just address the elephant in the room, that it is awkward. That if you, as a couple, if they have been out of the habit of talking about sex or any form
Mhm.
of intimacy, it is going to feel awkward. So, this is kind of like working out a muscle that you haven't worked out in a long time. So, you go to the gym and start lifting weights. You don't just do it once and then expect to look different or feel
Good way
different.
to put it. Yep.
Yeah, you have to keep working out that muscle, and it is going to feel a little painful, a little uncomfortable, a little awkward. And if you can just say to your partner like, okay, well, this feels really awkward, or what I'm about to ask
Make
you.
light of it.
Yeah, just if you could call attention to it, then it just very naturally just kind of makes it not seem so challenging. So that's
Right.
definitely one way. And something else, and this is an exercise that I love to share with couples, especially when they're first starting couples therapy. And it's what we call open-ended questions. And there's such a variety of different games out there that people can purchase, open-ended questions. I think there's one, it's called How Deep Will You Go?
You
You
can
can
even Google
Google.
search questions for your relationship too.
Yeah, and so it's about getting curious, but when you don't know what to ask, why not? Technology has such a negative connotation in life and in relationships. And it can be, sometimes it can be the mistress in a relationship if, people are really struggling with intimacy or, other issues. But why not use technology for the good? Why not, ask Google, what are 10 open-ended questions to start engaging in intimate or sexual conversations with my longtime partner? And you might need to tweak the wording around it. Chat GPT is a really great tool as well. You can plug all of that in. And then creating the ritual, I think you were talking about it a little bit ago, where you create a ritual of sitting out on the patio after the kids are in bed, pouring a coffee, a tea, a wine, whatever it is, that you prefer, and making it, every Tuesday night where we're going to sit out, we're going to just check in with each other. Here's our marital meeting. Let's throw in an open-ended question about our sex life.
And it
And
doesn't
so,
have to be long. I mean, it could be 15 minutes. So many times people are like, oh, well, we have no time. I'm like, well, if you have 15 minutes to play on your phone, you have 15 minutes to sit outside with your partner. If you have 15 minutes to watch TV, you have 15 minutes to talk with your partner. And
mhm,
so I think that giving yourself that space is so important. And I,
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you were saying about, you know, asking different questions, kind of getting involved in that. I know that one of the models that we use in the sex coaching realm is a plicit model, and the P means permission. And that's one of the things that whenever I work with a couple, it's one of the first things I tell them. I give them an idea of how it all works. And I say, P is for permission. Not only permission for this to be a safe space for you to talk with me and open up, but permission for each of them to be able to open up and not come back after after the session and be like, what did you tell her? I can't believe you said that. Why did you say that about me? And going back and forth and not allowing each other to open up because I said you're here for one reason, to improve your relationship and make things better. So when you're home, you want to also give your partner that permission to be
Mhm.
able to say, this is something that I feel we could work on, and not be offended, not take it to heart, just be like, oh, well, my partner's comfortable enough or safe enough, as you express, that safety is important, to share something that can really enhance or improve our relationship. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. Permission.
And one of the exercises that I think could be really fun for couples, this kind of goes into, the next question I think that we were going to get into, which is, just some exercises or fun games. And there's one that you can call like yes, no, maybe. And this is like literally taking just a list of different sexual experiences, sexual acts, and each partner just, privately just puts a little, a Y, an N, or an M, yes, no, maybe. And they, do it separately, and then they come back and share their responses. Again, this has to be after the safety has been set up between them. They feel they can be vulnerable. They've started to step into
You
some
would do
conversation.
what?
And right, exactly. And you might be surprised to know, like, if it's not forced, you're not doing this exercise so that tomorrow you have to step into all of these.
You
So
said
just
yes.
right. We didn't have a date or a time set for this. But just like, pulling out a new board game, I think it's really important before you to start an exercise like this to say, look, we're going to do this yes, no, maybe exercise, but I want to be really clear. This doesn't mean we have to jump into any of these things tomorrow, so that your partner might answer the questions more honestly than if you didn't set those parameters.
Right. We have something which is probably exactly what you're talking about. It's just called something different. It's the will, want, and won't. Yes, I will. No, I won't. I would do it if you want, type of thing. So it's kind of like that yes, no, maybe. And it's basically the same exact thing, as where you have all these different body parts, all these different activities for those body parts. And you
Mhm.
say, yes, I will. No, I won't. Maybe I will. We'll talk about it, type of
Right,
thing.
exactly.
So,
And one other thing you could do is like a desire journal, where you might have like a mutual place for this journal. Maybe it's in the bedroom, or obviously away from your kids or anyone else that might be in your home. And maybe you can just like start writing, like keep it real, G rated, PG rated in the beginning, like, write a little note like, hey, you really looked great in that outfit you were wearing earlier today. And then the other person can respond back, just whenever they're, passing by. So there's no pressure, and there's no, it's pretty open ended to whatever they want it to be. But it's like, what did they used to call those, like in middle school, like slam books or
plan
something? Where
books,
right, right,
yes.
back and forth. But again, what
Oh
you're
my
doing
God.
also is creating kind of this like silly, playful, flirty,
Playful.
yeah, like interaction,
Yes.
even when you're cooking dinner or having to get the kids to bed and things are hectic, stressful, and busy. These are things you can do that don't cost any money. It
Right.
doesn't require a whole heck of a lot of time, but the power of the connection that you're creating is invaluable.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of being playful and flirty is missed out so much after
Mhm.
having kids, after having a family, because it's all about them many times, and you forget about you as a couple. And so that playfulness that you do with your kids, and doing things, and all the fun things you do with them, you need to do those things again with your partner. It's extremely important. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and then so many times you have mismatched sex drives, that the couples are, one mood and is low here, one mood is high here, and sometimes you just have to be able to create that balance. And by doing some of those tips that you had, playing some games and activities, and adding some of those little fun things in that doesn't cost anything, that you can do are definitely a good way to help find some balance. Did you have another idea on how to help with the mismatch sex drive?
Yeah, well, mismatched sex drives, I know we're kind of getting into, that topic, which is such an important conversation. I'm so glad we're talking about this evening and on this podcast. And I can't tell you the countless couples where, maybe when they first got together and, they were immediately connected, the dopamine of all the mushy gushy feelings that they felt in the very beginning. It just kind of made their intimacy and sex life, I'll quote, easy, or easier. But as life settles in and those chemicals in the body start to subside, back when they first meet, they don't really have to put a lot of effort into their sex life. It just sort of comes more naturally.
Right.
But as time goes on and, people settle into becoming parents, they're getting a little bit older. Maybe they've had some medical issues come up along the way. Their desires might change. So I think the first thing I would recommend is the acknowledgement that your desire for intimacy is going to change. Okay. Even if you have a
Absolutely.
high sex drive, how that might look and the things that
It's
bring
going
you
to ebb and
pleasure.
flow throughout the whole relationship.
Absolutely. So I think just for both people to know that it's okay that things change. And if they're putting in those, rituals of connection and those communication and minimizing their resentments, all of those things are really beneficial so that when they hit a stumbling block in the bedroom, that they have safety to be able to talk about these things. The other thing I would suggest is redefining what intimacy means to each person. And I don't
Absolutely.
think that gets talked about enough between couples, is really like sitting down and having a conversation like, what do you define as intimacy? And cross check that with your partner. Maybe there are some things that overlap that they could then start to step into safely for one another without the fear of the other person wanting too much, or the feelings of rejection, where when that one partner has a low libido, low sex drive, that in some way that's not making their partner feel rejected, that it's not really about them all the time.
Right, exactly. And I think that's very important because I also ask that question is, what do you and what do you feel that intimacy is? And I think that's really important. So those are some great suggestions. And we're going to be taking another break, quick little 2-minute break for a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to try to figure out how to get out of that roommate rut to be able to get a little bit more romance. So we'll see you in 2.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And we're back for our last segment of the show, and we wanted to be able to figure out with Susan Block how to get from being parents back to lovers again, and how to kind of rebuild that bridge gap that we have where so many couples feel like roommates again because all their focus is on kids and family. So how do we get out of that rut? And we're talking about that with Susan right now. And one of the questions I have is that when couples do feel like they've lost their spark, where do you suggest that they start? Because they'll come into you and just say, yeah, we've had kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old. How do we start getting that spark back? What kind of recommendations might you have for them?
Yeah, I think that, couples so often will say, we love each other, but we've just lost that spark. And when that happens, it can feel very confusing and sometimes even scary. They're uncertain of, what the future looks like. Exactly. So I think, again, it's about reframing this a little bit for couples. It's the spark isn't necessarily gone. It's just kind of buried under all the other stuff. And so under the stress, under the responsibilities, under, everything that they have going on, just knowing that what what the spark looked like before is not necessarily what it's going to look like. It's not the firework explosions that, you might have had. Maybe you can get some of that back. But again, it's just redefining what the spark actually means. So that would be
exactly.
So what were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, because every phase of the relationship, especially in long-term relationships, are going to change. And so many times I'll hear people, they've been together 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is. Well, gosh, when we first got together, those first couple of years, I'm like, no, it's not about those first couple of years. That is the lust phase. That's the passionate phase. Not that, like you said, not that you can't get that back, but you have to redefine it and understand that every 7-10 years, your relationship will change, especially when, at the beginning you didn't have kids. Then let's say you wind up having kids, and then the kids are in your face every single day and hanging on you. And then they wind up going away, and then you're alone with your partner. And then, and then they're coming back with their kids. It's your stages of your life change so much. So you have to redefine every section of your life, every phase of your life. Absolutely. And when you were talking about in the previous section, we were talking about intimacy and how to rethink intimacy and finding out what does each partner think intimacy is. So I think it's important to be able to have everybody understand that intimacy is not just this. There's so much more involved, and that you can still be able to have pleasure and connection. And so when you are talking to them about intimacy, how do you help them rethink what intimacy is?
So again, I think the biggest thing is getting curious about your partner, getting curious about where your partner is sexually, what feels good, what isn't feeling good, what feels painful. Sometimes that, new medical things might pop up, maybe after having kids, or maybe partners going through a life change or a transition. Maybe they're extremely overwhelmed and stressed out, and they're just in survival mode. And so, you have to stay in touch with those conversations, because the body will react to those things. If you're stressed out at work and you're not sleeping well, the last thing you might want to do is to be touched in certain places. So just asking each other, getting curious, creating a very safe space for your partner so that you can be intimate, but it just might look different one month from another.
Right. And I like the word curious. One of the things I always say is one of the important things about sex is curiosity. And it's not just about doing what you know and say, okay, let's just do lips, nips below the hips. It's not all about that. It is about curiosity. What is my partner like? What is something new they might want? Because what you knew from your partner before kids may be completely different after kids, maybe different 7 years from then. Your
Mhm.
body changes, your needs changes, your want changes. And I think it's important also is that so many times we lose, like we said, the playfulness, the flirtiness, all these things in the relationship. And even though you have kids around, you still have to find little ways to build on that and still find ways to look at each other and laugh and be like, okay, it's okay to be flirty and it doesn't turn into sex or things
Yeah.
like that. So, what do you have any suggestions for that?
So another thing that I love to suggest to couples, especially ones with young kids, so often and I know we keep referring to this, like, the business of the day and running the house and all the responsibilities, but that's what's going on in couples' lives for so many years. And so one of the things that when you're in that period of life where life just doesn't feel like it's your own at the moment, sensuality and feeling sexy yourself is really important. And when you
Yeah.
were, pre-kids, pre all the responsibilities, you could slip on a great outfit and go out clubbing or dancing or to a nice dinner and you just automatically feel it. But when
Yeah, you
you're
can make up your hair.
Yeah. But when you don't have that ability to do that because you're knee deep in cleaning the playroom 50 times in a day, you just don't feel attractive. You don't feel like you
Right.
want anyone touching you or you feel gross. So, what I recommend is, after having some of the conversations about intimacy with your partner, maybe having it a little scheduled, not all the time, but there is something to scheduling,
Yes.
intimacy some of the time. So if okay, on Saturday night, is when we talked about that's like our date night or, night we're going to be playful. Maybe on Friday, you shave your legs. Maybe on Friday, you go and, do a little manscaping, or you take a bubble bath that morning. So it's like this kind of buildup that you're doing individually. It doesn't have anything to do with your partner, but it's things that you can do to make
For yourself.
yourself feel sexy, feel pretty, feel desirable, so that when you are
Absolutely.
ready to jump in the sack with one another, you're like kind of building all of that up. Put on like your favorite music and whether it's something sexy or just your favorite song. And as you're kind of going about your day, you're building up that mood. And
That
I
is
have, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great tip. And I think that every busy couple that is dealing with kids or just even life in general, that is a great prescription for intimacy, to focus on yourself, to make yourself feel beautiful, sexy, handsome, godlike. So that way it definitely helps you in the bedroom. So I wanted to just say thank you so much for being on the show. I want people to be able to see where they can find you if they need any support outside of their relationship. And so feel free to give us a little idea of where you are. It's everything that you share is also going to be on the bio as well underneath. So give us a little background as to how we could find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Stacy, for having me
Absolutely.
today.
It was great.
My team and I can be found at coralspringscounselingcenter.com. That's our website. We are a virtual practice in the state of Florida, and we could meet with people all over the state, from the Panhandle all the way down to the Keys.
Wow, that's great. That's a wrap then. Thank you so much. We're going to keep it real with a little bit of spice. And if today's conversation hit home for you, if you ever felt like sex was just one more thing on the list, you are definitely not alone. But connection is always possible, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. So hopefully after hearing our conversation, you got some great tips. A big thank you to Susan for sharing your wisdom and helping us break down the myths that intimacy has to disappear when life gets busy. And even when it feels like another task, couples can rediscover their connection and build a more fulfilling, satisfying sex life, even if it's one little step at a time. So thank you again. And don't forget to follow me, Dr. Stacy, on all the social media at Dr. Stacy Friedman for more tips. Until next time, stay curious, stay turned on, and never apologize for wanting more. See you next time, where my passion is to help you create yours. Have a good night. Thanks.
This has been the Purple Passion Project with host Dr. Stacy Friedman. Tune in each week as Stacy breaks down walls, busting myths, and gives you permission to want more, with no shame, no filters, and definitely no small talk. Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.